Welcome to this Corbettmaths video. In this video, we're going to go through the video solutions to the Corbettmaths Practice Questions on indices, and we're going to be focused on negative indices and fractional indices. If you need any extra help on fractional indices or negative indices, if you go to Corbettmaths and go to the videos and worksheet section and scroll down video numbers 173 and 175, there's dedicated video tutorials there on fractional indices and negative indices. Alternatively, you can scan the QR code. But in this video, we're going to focus on the video solutions to the practice questions, so let's get started. Okay, question number one. Question number one, we've been asked to find the value of 4 to the power of negative 2. So we've got a negative power, and whenever we want to work out a negative power, we can do 1 over and then the positive power. So it'd be 1 over 4 and then squared, just changing the power from negative 2 to 2, and we've done our 1 over. Now we're going to work out what 4 squared is. 4 squared is 16, so it'll be 1 over 16. So 4 to the power of negative 2 is equal to 1/16. So 1 over 16, 1/16, and that's it. So if we have a negative power, we do 1 over the positive power. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 2. So question number 2, we've been asked to work out the value of 3 to the power of negative 3. So if we want to work out 3 to the power of negative 3, we do 1 over, and then we do the positive power, so it's going to be 3 cubed. Rather than 3 to the power of negative 3, it's going to be 3 to the power of 3, or 3 cubed. Now let's work out what 3 cubed is. So we'll have 1 over, and then 3 cubed is 3 times 3 times 3. And 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So the answer would be 1 over 27, or 1/27. So 3 to the power of negative 3 is 1 over 27. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 3. So question number 3, it says that Noah's been asked to work out the value of 9 to the power of negative 2. And he said since 9 squared is equal to 81, then 9 to the power of negative 2 would be equal to minus 81. So he's just changed it from being 81 to minus 81 because it's a negative power. And the question says, is Noah correct? Explain your answer. So Noah's not correct. If we've got something to the negative power, we do 1 over. So what we do is we do 1 over 9 squared, and then 9 squared is 81. So the answer would be 1 over 81, not negative 81. So let's explain that. And that's it. I've just written down that Noah worked out 9 squared correctly, but then he should have written 1 over 81, not negative 81. So the answer should be 1 over 81. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 4. So question number 4, we've been asked to write 7 to the power of negative 1 as a fraction. Okay, so what we could do here is we've got 7 to the power of negative 1, so we're going to do 1 over the positive power, so 1 over 7 to the power of 1. And 7 to the power of 1 is equal to 7, so the answer is 1 over 7, or 1/7, and that's it. Another way to consider it is, if we've got to the power of negative 1, it just means find the reciprocal. So if you've got something to the power of negative 1, you can find its reciprocal. And the reciprocal of 7 is 1/7. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 5. So question number 5, we've been asked to work out the value of 2 to the power of negative 5. So let's work out what 2 to the power of negative 5 is. So it would be 1 over 2 to the power of 5. And 2 to the power of 5, well, let's work out what 2 to the power of 5 is. That's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. So that means that 2 to the power of negative 5 is 1 over 32, or 1/32. So that means that that is our answer, 1 over 32. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 6. So question number 6, we've been asked to evaluate 10 to the power of negative 4. So if we want to evaluate or work out 10 to the power of negative 4, we're going to do 1 over and then 10 to the positive power. So 1 over 10 to the power of 4, just changing the power from being negative to positive. And then 10 to the power of 4 would be 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So we've got 4 tens times together. So that'll be 10 times 10 is 100. Times 10 is 1,000, times 10 is 10,000, so 1,0,0,0,0. Or another thing to notice here is that if we've got 10 to the power of 4, it's a 1 followed by 4 zeros. So it's going to be 1 over 10,000, or 1/10,000th, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 7. So question number 7, we've been asked to write down the value of 25 to the power of 0. Now, anything to the power of 0, except for 0, is equal to 1. So that means 25 to the power of 0 is equal to 1. And that's it. And if you watch the Corbettmaths video on negative indices, I go through and explain why that's the case. I think I look at 5 and I look at 5 to the power of 1, 5 to the power of 2, 5 to the power of 3 and so on. And I show you that if we go back downwards, we divide by 5 every time. So if 5 to the power of 1 is equal to 5, 5 to the power of 0 would be, you would divide by 5 again and you would get 1. So that means that 25 to the power of 0 is equal to 1. Okay, next question, question number 8. So question number 8, we've been asked to write 5 to the power of negative 3 as a fraction. So we want to write this as a fraction, so let's get a negative power, so we're going to do 1 over 5 cubed. And 5 cubed is 5 times 5 times 5, and 5 times 5 is 25, times 5 is equal to 125. So that means that 1 over 5 cubed would be 1 over 125, or 1/125th. So that means that, as a fraction, 5 to the power of negative 3 would be 1 over 125. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 9. So question number 9, we've been asked to write down the value of 5/3 to the power of negative 1. Now, in terms of this question, there's a few different ways we could look at it. One approach is you could do 1 over the positive power, so it'd be 1 over 5/3 to the power of 1. So we've changed the power from being negative to positive and put it on the denominator. So we've got 1 divided by 5/3 to the power of 1. 5/3 to the power of 1 would be 5/3, so we'd have 1 over 5/3. And then to work out 1 over 5/3, it's 1 divided by 5/3, so it'd be 1 divided by 5/3, just changing that fraction to a division. And then if we want to work this out, remember you times by the reciprocal of the thing you're dividing by. So we're going to have 1 times 3/5, and 1 times 3/5 is 3/5. So that means the answer is 3/5. So that's one way you could approach it. However, if I was doing a question like this, and we had 5/3 to the power of negative 1, the way I would deal with it is, well, because it's got a negative power, normally you would do 1 over, but if it's a fraction, I just do the reciprocal of the fraction. So I just change it from 5/3 to 3/5 to the power of 1. So if I want to get rid of that negative power, I can just do the reciprocal of the fraction and then do 3/5 to the power of 1, which would just be 3/5, and that's it. Or another way to consider it is, if you go to the power of negative 1, it just means the reciprocal of it, so that'll be 3/5. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 10. Okay, so question number 10, we've been asked to write down the value of 2/5 to the power of negative 3. Okay, so we've got 2/5 to the power of negative 3, so we've got this fraction to the power of negative 3. I'm not going to do 1 over this because it is a fraction already, so what I'm going to do is to change the power from a negative to a positive, I'm going to do the reciprocal of the fraction. So the reciprocal of 2/5 would be 5/2, but I'm going to change the power from being negative to positive. So we've got 2/5 to the power of negative 3, we've changed that to 5/2 to the power of 3. And now we just need to work out what this would be. So it'd be 5/2 times 5/2 times 5/2. So we could do 5/2 times 5/2 times 5/2. And 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. And 2 times 2 times 2 is equal to 8. So the answer would be 125 over 8. Or another way to do that would be just to cube the 5, which is 125, and to cube the 2, which is 8. And that's it. So if I was asked to work out 2/5 to the power of negative 3, I would change the power from being negative to positive by taking the reciprocal of the fraction, and then I would just cube the numerator and cube the denominator, and that would give us 125 over 8. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 11. So question number 11, we've been asked to write down the value of 36 to the power of a half. So here we've got a fractional power, and it's to the power of a half. And if you've ever got to the power of a half, it just means work out the square root. So if you've got 36 to the power of a half, it means find the square root of 36. If you had 9 to the power of a half, you'd work out the square root of 9. So if you ever have to the power of a half, it means find the square root of it. And it's very important to learn that. So 36 to the power of a half will be the square root of 36, and the square root of 36 is equal to 6. So 36 to the power of a half will be equal to 6. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 12. So question number 12, we've been asked to circle the value of 100 to the power of a half. So remember, to the power of a half means the square root, so we're going to do the square root of 100. And the square root of 100 is equal to 10. So that means the 100 to the power of a half will be equal to 10. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 13. So question number 13, we've been asked to write down the value of 1000 to the power of a third. So to the power of a half means to square root something. To the power of a third means to cube root it. Whatever's on the denominator that's what root you want to take. So if it's 1/2, there's a 2 on the denominator, so you take the second root, or the square root. If there's a 3 on the denominator, you take the third root, which is the cube root. If it's a 4 in the denominator, you take the fourth root, and so on. So here we've got a power of 1/3. So that means we're going to take the third root, or the cube root of 1000. So if we work out the cube root of 1000, that'll tell us what 1000 to the power of a third is. So the cube root of 1000 would be, what number do we times by itself again to get 1000? Well, that would be 10, because 10 times 10 times 10 is 1000. So that means that 1000 to the power of a third is equal to 10. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 14. So question number 14, it says that Martin has been asked to work out the value of 27 to the power of a third. And he says, since a third of 27 is equal to 9, that means that 27 to the power of a third is equal to 9. And we've been asked, is Martin correct? And to explain our answer. Okay, so Martin has just worked out a third of 27, and that's not right. As we've talked about, if we've got to the power of a third, that means find the cube root of it. So we need to find the cube root of 27. And the cube root of 27 is 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 is equal to 27. So that means that Martin is incorrect, because it's not going to be 9. 27 to the power of a third, 27 to the power of a third is equal to 3. So let's explain that. And that's it. I've just explained to the power of a third. So to the power of a third means the cube root. And the cube root of 27 is equal to 3. That's a really badly written 3 there. So that is 3. I'm just going to write it again. I'll scribble it out. So that's it. So Martin is incorrect. It's not 9. The answer should be 3. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 15. So question number 15 says, write down the value of 16 to the power of a quarter. So remember, whatever's on the denominator, we take that root. So we want to take the fourth root. So that's the fourth root of 16. So saying what number do we times by itself, and by itself, and by itself again to get 16? I think I said that right. And the answer would be 2, because 2 times 2 is equal to 4, times 2 is equal to 8, times 2 is equal to 16. So that means that the fourth root of 16 would be equal to 2. So 16 to the power of a quarter is equal to 2. And that's it. So whatever's on the denominator, you take that root. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 16. So question number 16 says, work out the value of 64 to the power of 2/3. Okay, so this time, rather than just having a 1 on the numerator, like to the power of a half, or the third, or a quarter, or something like that, we've got to the power of 2/3. So the numerator is 2. So whenever you've got a fractional power, a fractional index, so such as this, or fractional indices, whatever's on the denominator, you take that root, and whatever's on the numerator, you then do that power. For the previous ones, the numerator was always 1, so we didn't need to do anything else. But here we've got a numerator of 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the cube root of 64, and then we're going to square our answer. So we're going to do the cube root of 64, and that's equal to 4, because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. And then we're going to square that. So 4 squared is equal to 16. So that means that 64 to the power of 2/3 is equal to 16, because you take the cube root and then you square it. So the cube root of 64 is 4, and then 4 squared is 16. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 17. So question number 17, it says write down the value of 125 to the power of 2/3. So again, here we've got to the power of 2/3, so we're going to take the cube root of 125, and then we're going to square it. So let's take the cube root of 125, and that's equal to 5, because 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. And then we're going to square that, so 5 squared is equal to 25. So that means that 125 to the power of 2/3 would be 25, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 18. Okay, so question number 18, we've got quite a few parts here. We've got part A, B, and C, and we've been asked to work out the values of, so part A, 27 to the power of 2/3. So the power is 2/3, so we're going to take the cube root and then square it. So 27, let's take the cube root, so the cube root of 27 is equal to 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And then we're going to square it, so we're going to do 3 squared, and 3 squared is equal to 9. So that means that 27 to the power of 2/3 is equal to 9. Okay, and then part B. Part B, we've got 10,000 to the power of 3/4. So we're going to take the fourth root and then cube it. So the fourth root of 10,000 will be equal to 10, because 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 is 10,000. And then we're going to cube it. So 10 cubed is equal to 10 times 10 is 100, times 10 is 1,000. So that'd be equal to 1,000. And that's it. Okay, and then part C. Okay, I like part C, because part C, we've got a negative fractional index. So we've got a negative fractional power. So here we've got 32 to the power of negative 4/5. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the negative to begin with, because remember, if you've got a negative power, you can do 1 over the positive power. So 32 to the power of 4/5. So we've just written it, but with a positive power by doing 1 over. Now we're going to work out what 32 to the power of 4/5 is. So we're going to take the fifth root and then do to the power of 4. So the fifth root, I'm just going to go over here and work it out. The fifth root of 32 is equal to 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is equal to 32. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. So the fifth root of 32 is equal to 2. Now we need to do to the power of 4, so we're going to take the 2 and then 2 to the power of 4. And that would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. I think I've said the right number of 2s there. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So 32 to the power of 4/5 is 16. So that means the answer would be 1 over 16. And that's it. So if you've got 32 to the power of negative 4/5, the answer would be 1 over 16. And what I do here whenever I've got negative fractional indices is I just change it from being a negative power to a positive power by doing 1 over, and then just work out what that denominator is. And the denominator would be 16 by doing the 5th root and then doing to the power 4. So the answer is 1 over 16. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 19. So question number 19, it's a bit of a cheeky question because it says work out 16 to the power of 0.5. Now we've got a decimal power here, but 0.5 is equal to a half. Obviously 0.5 is equal to a half, knowing your equivalent fractions, decimals and percentages. Most primary school students know that 0.5 is equal to a half. So here we've got 16 to the power of 0.5, so that'll be 16 to the power of a half. And remember, to the power of a half means the square root. We don't need to do any other powers because the numerator is 1, so we just do to the power of 1, which would be just be the, whenever you square root it would just be the answer. So we're just going to work out the square root of 16. And the square root of 16 is equal to 4. So 16 to the power of a half is equal to 4. So that means that 16 to the power of 0.5 is equal to 4. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 20. So question number 20, we've been asked to work out 16 to the power of 3/2. So the denominator is 2, so we're going to take the square root, and then we're going to get the answer, and then we're going to cube it because the numerator is 3. So it's just the same as the other ones. Even though it's the top of every fraction, you still take whatever is on the denominator, you take that root, and then whatever's on the numerator, you do that power. So 16 to the power of 3/2, let's square root to begin with. So it's the square root of 16 is equal to 4 because 4 times 4 is 16. And then we're going to do to the power of 3, so 4 to the power of 3, or 4 cubed. And 4 cubed would be 4 times 4 times 4. And 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 is 64. So 4 cubed is 64, and that's it. So 16 to the power of 3/2 is 64, and that's it. And one thing I just want to mention here is if you're doing these questions and you want to check your answers, and you're just doing these for extra practice at home, feel free after you do the questions, and to check it, just feel free to get your calculator and type in 16 to the power of 3/2, and then you'll see the answer is equal to 64. And it's actually good practice to be able to type in these fractional powers into your calculator as well. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 21. So question number 21, we've been asked to write down the value of 49 to the power of minus a half. So here we've got a negative fractional power. So what we're going to do is we've got 49 to the power of minus a half. Let's get rid of the minus sign by doing 1 over. Remember, if you've got a negative power, you can just do 1 over the positive power. So 1 over 49 to the half. And then 49 to the power of a half. Well, to the power of a half just means to square root it. So the square root of 49 is equal to 7. So that would be equal to 1 over 7. So that's it. So 49 to the power of minus a half would be 1/7. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 22. So question number 22, we've been asked to work out the value of 81 to the power of minus 3/4. So here again, we've got a negative fractional power. So let's get rid of the negative power by doing 1 over the positive power, 1 over 81 to the power of 3/4. Now we just need to work out what 81 to the power of 3/4 would be. So we're going to take the 4th root and then cube it. So the 4th root of 81. So the 4th root of 81 would be 3 because 3 times 3 is equal to 9. Times 3 is equal to 27, times 3 is equal to 81. So the 4th root of 81 is equal to 3. And actually, don't be daunted. Whenever you see something like the 4th root of 81, don't be daunted because usually the answer is going to be a 2 or a 3 or a 4, something like that, because the 4th root, whenever you times something by itself and by itself and by itself again, it's going to get quite big. And you're going to see numbers such as the powers of 2, such as 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, or the powers of 3, such as 3, 9, 27, 81, or the powers of 4, which would be 4, 16, 64, the powers of 5, 5, 25, 125, 625. You get to see those numbers quite regularly whenever you're dealing with fractional indices. So here, whenever I was asked to work out the 4th root of 81, I just knew it was going to be 3 straight away. Okay, so we've done the 4th root, now we need to cube it. So 3 cubed. And 3 cubed would be 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. So that means that 81 to the power of 3/4 is 27. So that means our answer would be 1 over 27. And that's it, 1 over 27. So we've worked out 81 to the power of negative 3/4. It's 1 over 27. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 23. So question number 23, we've been asked to work out the value of 16/25 to the power of a half. So here we've got to the power of a half, and yes, it is a fraction, but to the power of a half just means to square root, so we're just going to square root this fraction. And to square root a fraction, you just square root the numerator and square root the denominator. So if I was asked to work this out, I would just do the square root of 16/25, and the square root of 16/25 would be, well, the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 25 is equal to 5. So that means that the square root of 16/25 is 4/5. So that means that 16/25 to the power of a half, well, we work out the square root of it, so that'll just be 4/5, and that's it. So 4/5. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 24. Okay, so question number 24, we've been asked to work out 9/25 to the power of 3/2. So here we're going to look at our denominator, which is a 2, so we're going to take the square root, and then we're going to look at our numerator, which is 3, and then we're going to cube it. So let's work out the square root of this fraction. The square root of 9/25 would be equal to, well, the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 25 is 5. So the square root of that fraction would be 3/5. And you can check that if you do 3/5 times itself, 3/5 times 3/5, you get 9/25. So we've worked out the square root, now we need to cube it. So we need to take our fraction, our 3/5, and we need to cube it. And to cube a fraction, you just cube the numerator and you cube the denominator. Or you could do 3/5 times 3/5 times 3/5, and that'll give you the same answer. So 3 cubed is equal to 3 times 3 times 3, 27. And then 5 cubed is 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. So the answer would be 27 125ths. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 25. Okay, so question number 25, we've been asked to work out 27 1/1000ths to the power of 2/3. So here what we're going to do is we're going to take the cube root and then square it. So let's work out the cube root of this fraction. So the cube root of 27 1/1000ths. So we're just going to cube root the numerator and cube root the denominator. So the cube root of 27 is equal to 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And the cube root of 1,000 is 10, because 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. So that means the cube root of this fraction is 3/10. So we've cube rooted it, now we need to square it. So we're going to do 3/10 squared. And when we square 3/10, well, we just squared the numerator and squared the denominator. So 3 squared is 9, and 10 squared is 100. So the answer would be 9/100ths. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 26. So question number 26 says, work out the value of 32 to the power of negative 0.4. So again, we've got another decimal power. Let's change that decimal to a fraction. 0.4 is equal to 2/5. Because remember that 1/5 is 0.2, so 2/5 would be 0.4. So that means that 32 to the power of minus 0.4 would be the same as 32 to the power of minus 2/5. So now what we need to do is work out what 32 to the power of minus 2/5 would be. So it's a negative power, so let's do 1 over the positive power, so 1 over 32 to the power of 2/5. And now we need to work out the fifth root of 32 and then square it. So the fifth root of 32 is equal to 2. I remember I said that you get to spot those answers quite quickly, because remember that 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 32. So the fifth root of 32 would be 2. And then we need to square it. So 2 squared is equal to 4. So that means that 32 to the power of 2/5 would be 4. So that means our answer would be 1/4. So 32 to the power of minus 0.4 is equal to 1/4. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 27. So question number 27 says, work out 25 to the power of a half divided by 2 to the power of minus 2. So let's work out each of these separately, and then we can work out the division. So 25 to the power of a half. So to the power of a half means the square root. So we're going to do the square root of 25, which is 5. So 25 to the power of a half is 5. And that's divided by, and now let's work out what 2 to the power of negative 2 is. Okay, so 2 to the power of negative 2, it's got a negative power, so we're going to do 1 over the positive power. And then we'll just need to work out what 2 squared is, which is 4. So that's equal to 1 over 4, 1/4. So 2 to the power of negative 2 is 1/4. So we need to work out what 5 divided by 1/4 is. Now, there's a couple of ways we can work this out. One way is to think how many quarters there would be in 5. So in a whole, in 1, there's 4 quarters. So in 5, there'd be 20 quarters. So you could just work it out that way. So the answer is equal to 20. Or we could work it out. We could do 5 divided by 1/4. So 5 is the same as 5 over 1. And we're going to divide by 1/4. So we're going to work out the reciprocal of 1/4. So we're going to do 5 over 1 multiplied by 4 over 1. So doing the reciprocal of the fraction we're dividing by. And then 5 times 4 is equal to 20. And 1 times 1 is equal to 1. So we've got 20 over 1, which is 20. So that's it. So 25 to the power of a half divided by 2 to the power of minus 2 would be equal to 20. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 28. So question number 28, we've been asked to work out 125 to the power of a third multiplied by 2 to the power of minus 3. So 125 to the power of a third. So to the power of a third means we need to work out the cube root of it. So we're going to do the cube root of 125, which is equal to 5. So that's equal to 5. And now we need to work out what 2 to the power of minus 3 is. So 2 to the power of minus 3, you would do 1 over the positive power, so 1 over 2 cubed, and 2 cubes equal to 8. So that would be 1/8. So we've got 125 to the power of a third is 5, multiplied by, and then 2 to the power of minus 3 would be 1/8. So we've got 5 times an eighth, which would be 5/8, and that's it. So our answer is 5/8. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 29. Okay, so question number 29, we've been asked to work out 16 to the power of 1.5 divided by 8 to the power of 0. Okay, well, 8 to the power of 0 is quite straightforward because remember that anything to the power of 0 except for 0 is equal to 1. So we're going to do plus 1 there because 8 to the power of 0 is 1. Now we just need to work out what 16 to the power of 1.5 is. So 1.5 is a fraction, a top-heavy fraction, is 3 over 2. Is equal to 3 over 2 because 3 divided by 2 is equal to 1.5. So 1.5 is 3 halves. So that means that we've got 16. So we've got 16 to the power of 3 halves. And if we want to work out what 16 to the power of 3 halves is, we need to do the square root and then cube it. So the square root of 16 is equal to 4. And then we're going to cube it. 4 cubed is equal to 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So 16 to the power of 3 halves would be 64. So that means that 16 to the power of 1.5 would be 64. So we've got 64 plus 1, and 64 plus 1 is 65. And that's it, 65. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 30. So question number 30, we've been asked to work out the value of 49 over 100 to the power of minus a half. So we want to work out what 49 100ths to the power of minus a half is. So first of all, I'm going to deal with this negative power. Because we've got a fraction to a negative power, I'm going to find the reciprocal of it. So the reciprocal of this fraction will be what we get when we flip it over, which is 100 over 49. So that's got rid of the negative power. So we've now got to the power of a half. So we've just done the reciprocal of the fraction. Now we just need to work out what 149ths the power of a half is. So to find that, we just need to square root it. So we just need to square root 100 over 49. And to square root a fraction, you just square root the numerator and square root the denominator. So the square root of 100 is 10, and the square root of 49 is 7. So the answer is 10 sevenths. And we could write that as a mixed number if we wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it at that, 10 sevenths. Okay, so let's have a look at our next question, question number 31. So question number 31 says W is greater than 1. So W is greater than 1, so it could be 2, 3, 1.1, a million. And it says write in order from smallest to largest, W to the power of 0. Well, that's going to be equal to 1 because anything to the power of 0 except for 0 is equal to 1, and W is greater than 1, so that would have to be equal to 1. W cubed. W cubed divided by W to the power of 4. Now here we've got W to the power of 3 divided by W to the power of 4. I remember whenever we're dividing things with the same base, we can take away the power. So 3 take away 4 is minus 1. So that'd be W to the power of minus 1. And then we've got W to the power of minus 2. So we've been asked to write in order from smallest to largest, W to the power of 0, W cubed, W to the power of minus 1, and W to the power of minus 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a value for W. So I'm going to let W equal 2. So I'm going to let W equal 2. I could let it equal 10 or 100 or a million or something, but I'm just going to let it equal 2. So 2 to the power of 0 is 1. 2 cubed would be equal to 8 because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. 2 to the power of negative 1, that'd be 2 to the power of negative 1 would be, remember, to the power of negative 1 means the reciprocal, so it'd be the reciprocal of 2, which is a half, or you could do 1 over the positive power, so 1 over 2 to the power of 1, which is a half as well. And here we're going to have 2 to the power of negative 2, which would be 1 over 2 squared, and 2 squared is 4, so 1 over 4 quarter. So from smallest to largest, well, the smallest one was this one, so that's W to the power of negative 2. The next smallest was this one, so W cubed over W to the power of 4. The next smallest was this one, W to the power of 0, and then the biggest was W cubed. And that's it, so we put them in order from smallest to largest. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 32. So question number 32, we've been asked to work out 2 to the power of 4 multiplied by 4 to the power of negative 2. So let's work out each one separately. So I'm going to start off with 2 to the power of 4. Well, that's going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. Okay, so 2 to the power of 4 is 16, multiplied by 4 to the power of negative 2, 4 to the power of negative 2. So we're going to do 1 over the positive power, so 1 over 4 squared, and 1 over 4 squared is 16, so 1 over 16. So that's 1/16. So we've got 16 times a 16th, and 16 times 1/16. Well, if we cut a pizza into 16ths and we've got 16 slices, that's equal to 1. Or you could do 16 times a 16th would be 16 16ths, and then that simplifies down to 1. So the answer is 1. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 33. So question number 33, we've been asked to work out 10 to the power of negative 2 and to give our answer as a decimal. So 10 to the power of negative 2, so we've got a negative power, so we're going to do 1 over the positive power. 10 squared is 100, so it's 1 over 100. So So 10 to the power of negative 2 as a fraction would be 1 over 100 or 1/100th. Now we need to write it as a decimal. Now a hundredth, well, remember our place value, we've got units or ones or units, whatever you want to call them, a decimal point, then we've got tenths, and then we've got hundredths. So we've got 1/100th, so that'd be 0.01. So that'd be 0.01. Alternatively, you could do the numerator divided by the denominator, and 1 divided by 100 would be 0.01. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 34. So question number 34, we've been asked to simplify fully 4 to the power of negative 2 multiplied by 4 to the power of a third, all cubed. Okay, so let's work this out. I'm going to do each part separately. So I'm going to do 4 to the power of negative 2, and I'm going to work out what 4 to the power of a third, all cubed, would be. So let's start off with 4 to the power of negative 2. So 4 to the power of negative 2 will be 1 over the positive power, so 1 over 4 squared, and 4 squared is 16, so 1 over 16. So 4 to the power of negative 2 would be 1 over 16. Then we'd have our multiply, and now we're going to work out what 4 to the power of a third cubed is. Now, there's a few different ways we could consider this. One is to consider, well, to the power of a third means the cube root, so we're going to cube root it, and then we're going to cube it. So you just be left with what you started with, which would be 4. So that's one way to consider it. To the power of a third is to cube root something, but then you're going to cube it, so you just get 4. Alternatively, another way to consider it would be if you had 4 to the power of a third, all cubed. Remember here you've got a power of a power. Remember your laws of indices. If you've got a power of a power, you times the powers together. And 3 times a third is equal to 1. So that'd be 4 to the power of 1, which is just 4. So that's it. And now here we've got a 16th times 4, which would be 4/16. And then if you simplify, that would be, well, divide the numerator and denominator by 4, you get 1/4. So the answer is 1/4, and that's it. So 4 to the power of negative 2 is equal to 1/16. 4 to the power of a third, all cubed, would be 4. 4 times a 16th would be 4/16, and then that cancels down to be 1/4, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 35. So question number 35, we've been asked to simplify fully 7 times 7 to the power of 0 times 7 to the power of negative 1. Well, 7, that's just 7. And 7 to the power of 0, that would be 1, because anything to the power of 0, except for 0, is 1. And then we're going to multiply by 7 to the power of negative 1. So that'd be 1 over 7 to the power of 1, which should be 1/7. Or remember, to the power of negative 1 means the reciprocal, and the reciprocal of 7 is 1/7. So we've got 7 times 1 times a 7th. So 7 times 1 is 7, times 1/7 would be 7/7, so 7/7. Because you've got 7 times 1/7 would be 7/7, and 7/7 is 1, so the answer is just 1. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 36. So question number 36 says, Isaac claims that 2 of these are equal in value, and we're asked, is Isaac correct? And we must show our working. Okay, so we've got 9 to the power of minus 3 halves, 3 to the power of minus 2, 16 to the power of minus 3 quarters, so we can work all those out, and the recurring decimal 0.037, where it goes 0.037, 0.37, 0.37, and so on. Okay, so let's write all of these as fractions. So first of all, we've got 9 to the power of minus 3 halves, so 9 to the power of minus 3 halves. So here we've got a negative power, so I'm going to do 1 over the positive power, so 9 to the power of 3 halves. So 1 over 9 to the power of 3 halves. And to work out 9 to the power of 3 halves, we're going to square root it and then cube it. So the square root of 9 is 3, and then 3 cubed would be 27. So that'd be 1 over 27. So that means that 9 to the power of minus 3 halves would be 1/27. So we've worked that one out. Okay, next, 3 to the power of minus 2. So 3 to the power of minus 2. And because it's got a negative power, we're going to do 1 over 3 squared. And 3 squared is 9, so that's 1 over 9. So that's 1/9. Okay, so we've got 2 more here. We've got the recurring decimal and 16 to the power of minus 3 quarters. Okay, so let's start off with this one, 16 to the power of minus 3 quarters. So 16 to the power of minus 3 quarters. So it's got a negative power, so we're going to do 1 over 16 to the power of 3 quarters. And to work this out, we're going to do the 4th root of 16, which is 2. And then we're going to cube that, and 2 cubed is 8. So that'd be equal to 1/8. So that means that 16 to the power of minus 3 quarters is 1/8. So this recurring decimal, we're going to let it equal x. So we're going to let x equal 0.037, 0.37, 0.37, or 0.37, and so on. So we're just going to let that equal x. Now I'm also going to times this by 1,000, because if I times this by 1,000, I would move all the digits 3 columns to the left. So I'd get 1,000x would be equal to, if we moved all the digits 3 columns to the left, it would be 37.037037 and so on. And as you can see here, we've got 1000x and x, and we've got the same bits after the decimal point. We've got the 037037037, and we've got the 037037 and so on. So that means if we took them away, if we do 1000x, take away x, we'd be left with 999x, and that would be equal to, if we took these away, the bits after the decimal points would cancel out, so we'd just be left with 37. And then we could divide by 999, so x equals 37 over 999, and then if you cancel that down on your calculator, 37, I'm just going to do this, 37 divided by 999 or over 999 is equal to 1/27th, and that's it. So these two are equal to each other. So is Isaac correct? The answer is yes. And I've just explained that yes, Isaac is correct because these two are equal to each other, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question. Okay, so question number 37. So question number 37, we've been asked to work out 49 to the power of a half. Well, that's 7 because to the power of a half means square root, and we're going to do the square root of 49, which is 7, plus 8 to the power of 4/3 all over 16 to the power of minus a half. Okay, so let's work this out. So let's work out each one of these separately. So 49 to the power of a half, as we've mentioned, is 7, because to the power of a half means square root. We've then got 8 to the power of 4/3. So if we want to work something out to the power of 4/3, we're going to do the cube root and then do to the power of 4. So the cube root of 8 is equal to 2, and then we're going to do 2 to the power of 4, and that's equal to 16. So that's equal to 16. And then we've got 16 to the power of minus a half. So because we've got a minus power, we're going to do 1 over the positive power, so 1 over 16 to the half. And 16 to the power of a half, you square root it, so it'll be 1 over 4, or a quarter. So let's replace the 49 to the power of a half with 7, the 8 to the power of 4/3 with 16, and the 16 to the power of minus a half with a quarter. So 49 to the power of a half, that's 7, plus 16 divided by a quarter. Okay, so let's work this out. Let's add together the values on the numerator. 7 plus 16 is 23, so we've got 23 divided by a quarter. So we've now got 23 divided by a quarter, or 23 over a quarter. So I'm going to write it as a division, 23 divided by a quarter. So if we want to work this out, I'm going to write it as 23 over 1, and then instead of divide, we're going to have multiply, and then we're going to do the reciprocal of a quarter, which is 4 over 1. And let's just work this out. 23 times 4 is equal to 92 over, and 1 times 1 is 1. So we've got 92 over 1, which is just 92. So that's our answer, 92. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 38. Okay, so question number 38, we've been asked to write the following numbers in the form of 2 to the power of n. So we want to write all of these as 2 to a certain power. So we've got a nice easy one to begin with, 4. Well, 4 is equal to 2 squared, because 2 squared is equal to 4. Okay, our next one, part B, is 8. Well, 2 cubed is equal to 8, so 2 cubed. So each time we're trying to figure out what power would raise 2 to. So it would be 2 to a certain power to get this number. Okay, our next one, 32. Well, that's 2 to the power of 5. We've looked at that earlier on in the video because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is equal to 32. So it's 2 to the power of 5. Okay, next one, part D, we've got 1 over 2. So 1 over 2 is the reciprocal of 2. Because obviously if you do the reciprocal of 2, you get a half. So it's going to be 2 to the power of negative 1. Because remember, if you go to the power of negative 1, it's the reciprocal of it. Alternatively, you could say, well, we've got 2 on the denominator, so it would have to be a negative power. So it's going to be a negative power. And then you would want it to be to the power of 1. So it would be 1 over 2 to the power of 1, which is 2 to the power of negative 1. So it would be 2 to the power of negative 1. Okay, next one, a quarter, or 1 over 4. So because the 4 is on the denominator, we know it's going to be a negative power. And it's 4, so we've squared the 2, so it's going to be 2 to the power of negative 2. Because if we work out 2 to the power of negative 2, it'll be 1 over 2 squared, and 2 squared is 4. So it's 2 to the power of negative 2. Okay, our next one, f. F, we want to write the square root of 2 as a power of 2, so it'll be 2 to the power of something. Remember, if we've got to the power of a half, it means square root it. So if we wanted to write the square root of 2 as 2 to the power of something, it'll be 2 to the power of a half, because that'll be the square root of 2. Okay, our next one, g. So this time we've got the square root of 8. Now remember, 8 is equal to 2 cubed, so I'm going to write this as the square root of 2 cubed. So here we've got the square root, so that means that in terms of the power would be 2, and then the denominator of the fraction would be 2 because we're doing the square root. And we've got a cubed, so that means that we're going to have a 3 on the numerator. And if you had 2 to the power of 3 halves, you do the square root of 2 and then cube it, which would be the same as also, it actually doesn't matter which order you do it in. You could cube the 2 and then square root it, or you could square root the 2 and then cube it, you get the same answer. So here, if the square root of 8 would be equal to 2 to the power of 3 over 2, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question. Okay, so question number 39, we want to write the following numbers in the form of 5 to the power of n. So 5 would be 5 to the power of 1, it's just 5. 625, remember I mentioned this earlier on in the video, you get to recognize these because the powers of 5 are 5, 25, 125, 625. So that'll be 5 to the power of 4. And if you work out 5 times 5, that's 25, times 5 is 125, times 5 is 625. Okay, next one, 1. So remember that anything to the power of 0, except for 0, is equal to 1. So 5 to the power of 0 is equal to 1. Okay, our next one, 1/5. Well, that'll be 5 to the power of negative 1, because remember, to the power of negative 1 means the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 5 is 1/5, or it's just 1 over 5. Our next one, the square root of 5. Well, that'll be 5 to the power of a half, because if you do to the power of a half, you square root it. Okay, our next one, f, the square root of 125. Well, that's the square root of 5 cubed, because 5 cubed is 125. So we've got a square root and we've got a cubing. So that'll be 5 to the power of 3 over 2, because we were square rooting and cubing. And remember, it doesn't matter what order you do these in. If I wanted to work out 5 to the power of 3 halves, I could square root it and then cube the answer, or I could cube the 5 first of all and then square root it. So the square root of 125 as a power of 5 would be 5 to the power of 3 over 2. Okay, our next one, g, the square root of 3,125. Now earlier on we had that 625 was equal to 5 to the power of 4. And if we times that by 5, we get 3,125. So that must be 5 to the power of 5. So we've got the square root of 5 to the power of 5. So because we've got the square root, we're going to do a 2 on the denominator. And then we've got to the power of 5, so we're going to put a 5 on the numerator. So that means the square root of 3,125 as a power of 5 would be 5 to the power of 3 over 2. And try it out on your calculator and check it, and you'll see that that's the case. Okay, let's look at our next question. Okay, so question number 40. Question number 40, we've been asked to write 8 in the form of 4 to the power of n. So if we wanted to get 8 and we've got 4 to the power of n, what power would we raise 4 by to get to 8? Now we can't just do it in one go. You can't just do like 4 squared is 8 or anything like that there, because 4 squared is 16, so it's definitely not the case. But if we wanted to get from 4 to 8, what I'm thinking is we could square root the 4 first of all, because the square root of 4, the square root of 4 is equal to 2. And then if you had 2, you could do 2 cubed is equal to 8. So what I would love to do is if I've got 4 to the power of n, I would love to be able to square root and then to cube it. So if you want to square root and then cube it, it'll be 4 to the power of 3 over 2, because the denominator tells you to do the square root, which is 2, and then cube that would be 8. So it'll be 4 to the power of 3 over 2, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 41. So question number 41, we want to write 32 in the form of 4 to the power of n. So again, we want to think what power would we raise 4 by to get to 32. Now again, we're not going to be able to do it in just one step, because the powers of 4 would be 4, 16, 64. But again, it would be great if we could square root the 4. If we square root 4, we get that's 2. And then 2 to the power of 5 is equal to 32. So if we want to square root and then do to the power of 5, it would be 4 to the power of 5 over 2. Because 4 to the power of 5 over 2 is equal to 32. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 42. So question number 42, we've been asked to write 16 to the power of 3/4 times 4 to the power of 9 in the form of 2 to the power of n. So we want to write this in the form of 2 to the power of n. So here we've got 16 and 4 in terms of the bases. And that's not a coincidence, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is equal to 16. So here 16 is the same as 2 to the power of 4. So I'm just going to replace the 16 with 2 to the power of 4. And we've got that's to the power of 3/4. And then we've got times, and then again we've got 4, and then again that's not a coincidence, because 4 is 2 squared, and then to the power of 9. So what we've done there is I've just replaced the 16 with 2 to the power of 4, and the 4 with 2 squared. Okay, now we want to write it in the form of 2 to the power of n, so let's work this out, because here we've got a power of a power and a power of a power, so let's work those out. So 2 to the power of 4, all to the power of 3/4, we times the powers together. So we're going to do 4 times 3/4. Now, instead of doing 4 times 3/4, you can actually do 3/4 of 4. And 3/4 of 4 is equal to 3. So the answer would be 2 to the power of 3. Alternatively, you could do 4 times 3/4, and if you do 3/4 times 4, or 0.75 plus 0.75 plus 0.75 plus 0.75, you get that's equal to 3. Or you could do 4 times 3/4 is 12/4, which is 3, but you're going to get 2 cubed. Okay, here you've got times, and then 2, and then you've got a power of a power, so you times the powers together. 2 times 9 is 18. And this is fantastic. Finally, we've got 2 to the power of 3 times 2 to the power of 18. You add the powers together. Remember, if you times things with the same base, you just add the powers, so it'll be 2 to the power of 21. So the answer is 2 to the power of 21, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our last question, question number 43. So question number 43, we've been asked to write 125 to the power of 1/3 divided by 25 to the power of 4 in the form of 5 to the power of n. Okay, so let's work this out. Now actually, 125 to the power of 1/3, well that's the cube root. And the cube root of 125 is 5 actually, so I'm just going to write 5 there. And divided by, and then we've got 25 to the power of 4. Now I'm going to write the 25 as 5 squared, because 25 is 5 squared. And then we've got to the power of 4, so to the power of 4. So we've got 5 divided by 5 squared, all to the power of 4. Now let's work out this part here. So we've got 5 divided by, and then we've got a power of a power, so let's times the powers together. So 2 times 4 is 8, so that's 5 to the power of 8. And then we've got 5 divided by 5 to the power of 8. And just remember, whenever we're dividing things with the same base, you can take away the powers. Now you might be thinking, well, the 5 hasn't got a power. It does. It's 5 to the power of 1. And if we take away the powers, 5 to the power of 1 divided by 5 to the power of 8, 1 take away 8 is -7. So 5 to the power of -7. So that's our answer, 5 to the power of -7, or -7. And that's it. And that's it. So these have been the video solutions to the Corbettmaths Practice Questions on negative indices and fractional indices. I really hope you found this video useful. If you have found it useful, please like it and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you need any extra help on fractional indices or negative indices, if you go to Corbettmaths and go to video numbers 173 and 175, there's dedicated video tutorials there for you on negative indices and fractional indices. Alternatively, you can scan the QR code. But again, I really hope you found this video useful. If you have found it useful, please like it and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.